Good evening, everybody, and welcome. It's time for us to open the 2024 Aspen Security Forum. You're all most welcome. And please now join me for our opening remarks today come from our co-founder of the Aspen Strategy Group and the co-chair of Aspen Security Forum and Aspen Strategy Group, Professor Joe Niamh.
Good afternoon, everybody, and it's a pleasure to be able to welcome you to the 15th Aspen Security Forum. The idea of having a place where we can get together away from Washington and national capitals and try to think about the world's problems is very important. And as in traditional Aspen manner, it's purely nonpartisan. So in that sense, we're lucky to have the speakers and the moderators and all you as our attendees and participants, as well as people around the world who are watching this online. I'd like to also thank the president and CEO of Aspen, Dan Porterfield, who is here, and the board chair, Margot Pritzker, and Elliot Gerson, who is a long stalwart. And I should note for those of you who are old Aspen hands that we're graced by the presence of Walter Isaacson. Now, it says in the notes that were handed to me when I got off the plane this afternoon, now you're on your own. You're supposed to do a scene setter for the forum. Well, it reminded me of that famous description of the French Revolution, the best of times and the worst of times. And today is not the worst of times. If you look back in our history, despite the bad things we see around us today, it has been worse. I'm going to talk about this in my book talk tomorrow afternoon, so I won't bother with it now. But if one thinks back, or as one lived through the 1960s, where we suffered from 3 major assassinations and cities on fire, this is not the worst of times, despite the horrible return of violence and assassination that we saw this last week. But it's not the best of times either. Think back to an Aspen Security Forum 3 or 4 years ago, and somebody asked, well, what's going on in the world? And you would have said, well, there are all sorts of problems, difficult problems, but basically the last thing we would expect is a great war in Europe. People would have said, yes, Putin might nibble away at more of Donetsk, but he's not likely to try to seize the whole thing. And now what we have is 2.5 years of a bloody war, which hundreds of thousands of people have died. So that's one of the things that's not as good as it was a few years ago. Or think of the Middle East. If we think back to a security forum a few years ago, we would have said, finally, after decades, it looks like there's progress. We have the Abraham Accords. It looks like you're going to have some rapprochement between Israel and its Arab neighbors. The word was that the Saudis would find some way to relate to the Israelis if the Israelis made progress on a Palestinian issue. And then, of course, there was last October 7th, where we had the atrocities of the hostage taking and the killing that launched what is now not 2.5 years of war. We hope it won't be, but has been getting on now toward a year of war. And this is not even to mention areas of the world like Sudan, where we're facing another possible genocidal situation. So not the worst of times, but certainly not the best of times. In that sense, I think we have to look and ask ourselves, what is technology bringing us? And the technology that everyone is thinking about today is obviously artificial intelligence. And we're going to hear about it here at the Security Forum and more later. But the questions of artificial intelligence are questions which can also be best and worst. If you think of the prospects in medicine of understanding protein folding and curing cancer, enormous progress is possible. On the other hand, if you think about autonomous lethal weapons and terrorists getting their hands on them, it could be the worst. So we're faced with major technological changes, and we don't know whether they'll bring best or worst of times. So in that sense, I want to say that going back to where I mentioned a few minutes ago, the fact that we have a nonpartisan opportunity for discussion of these issues is extremely important. We have been disrupted in our program by events. The horrible assassination attempt means that we are missing our people from Homeland Security and the Secret Service who were supposed to be with us. And our speaker, who is to kick this off this afternoon, the former director of the Aspen Strategy Group, Nick Burns, now ambassador to China, is stuck in China with COVID. We haven't escaped that yet either in terms of best and worst of times. However, we have been able to deal with the major challenge of China with a spectacular panel, which Niamh is going to introduce for you. And it's 4 excellent people dealing with the China challenge. And I will report to Nick that it took 4 people to replace him. So welcome again to Aspen Strategy Forum, and we hope you'll have a fruitful and enlightening next several days.
Thanks, Joe. Ladies and gentlemen, he is a national and global treasure, so he is. My next job is to thank everybody who makes this all possible. We have many of our sponsors here, and if you could please hold your applause, but we're so deeply grateful to them for their support and their partnership, because none of this would be possible without them, so you should all be grateful too. Google, and we have the beautiful Google Pavilion out there, the MasterCard Center for Inclusive Growth, McKinsey, Microsoft, MITRE, the Walton Family Foundation, AWS, the Financial Times, Lockheed Martin, Rockefeller Foundation, Govini, Intel, American Airlines, Anduril, Beacon Global Strategies, Boeing, Gecko, Prion, Citi, Mayer Brown, and Zscaler. So thank you very much. Well, Joe set the scene, and now I'm going to please invite our panelists to come to the stage so we can start the China Challenge, the opening panel of the 15th Annual Aspen Security Forum.